At 5 a.m., she's banging on my door, demanding I let her out-of-town guest use my EV charger, like it's some public utility. I said no. Simple. Next thing I know, she's calling 911, saying it's an emergency. Yeah, because her cousin's Tesla needed juice. When the cops showed up and heard the reason, even they couldn't stop laughing. In most neighborhoods, peace is something you hope for. In an HOA neighborhood, peace is something you're promised, at least on paper. I moved into this subdivision a little over a year ago, after a few chaotic years of apartment hopping, city noise, and shared walls that never quite kept anything private. I'd saved up for a place that was mine, where I could charge my EV at night, work odd hours without raising eyebrows, and sip coffee on the porch without overhearing 3 other conversations. The house wasn't huge. It wasn't fancy, but it had the one thing I've been craving for years: control over my space. A tidy driveway, a little patch of grass, a quiet routine, and a private, hardwired EV charger installed right off my garage wall. My pride and joy of utility upgrades. I don't throw parties. I don't blast music. I don't leave garbage bins out past collection day. In HOA terms, I'm the dream resident. You'd barely know I existed if you weren't looking. But some people, they're always looking. Her name was Karen. I didn't give her that nickname. She wore it like a badge. Karen was the self-declared queen of the block, complete with a clipboard, monogrammed polo, and a relentless smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As president of the HOA, she introduced herself within 48 hours of me moving in. Not with cookies, but with a pamphlet. "This is the updated list of community guidelines," she said. "You want to read through page 6. We're really working on driveway harmony this season." Driveway harmony. She said it like it was a philosophy. Like keeping your front tires evenly aligned with your neighbor's curb mattered more than oxygen. Still, I nodded. I smiled. I thanked her for stopping by and quietly hoped it would be the last time she checked in. It wasn't. To be fair, for the first few months, Karen was more background noise than anything else. The occasional email blast about seasonal wreath regulations. A warning in a monthly newsletter about rogue solar lights that didn't match neighborhood tone. Nothing aimed directly at me. I kept to myself as always. My work schedule ran late. I'd get home around midnight sometimes, plug in the car, grab a quick dinner, and crash. The charger clicked to life around 1 a.m. and shut off before sunrise. Efficient, silent, and fully mine. Nobody ever said a word about it. Not a complaint, not a comment. I figured, like most modern homes, people either had their own or didn't care. Either way, it was working. Until spring break. That's when Karen's family came to visit. I only learned that from a fourth-hand chatter. A neighbor down the street mentioned it during a casual conversation about landscaping. Apparently, Karen had relatives coming from out of town, and they were so excited to see the new community. I didn't think twice about it. That is, until I noticed the second Tesla parked a little too close to my driveway one evening. Then the third. The cars came in over 2 days, sleek, expensive, and clearly not from around here. The license plates were out of state, the luggage racks were full, and the engines were silent, which made the next part feel a little ironic. On the second night of their arrival, around 9:30 p.m., I got a knock at the door. I opened it to find Karen standing there, hands clasped, smile loaded. "Hi there. Hope I'm not interrupting anything." I looked down at my hoodie, half-zipped, holding a plate of reheated pizza. "Nope," I said. "So, I wanted to ask a tiny favor. My nephew's staying for a few days, and his EV's just about out of charge. I thought since you already have a charger, maybe you wouldn't mind letting him use it overnight." She said it like she was offering me the chance to be a good neighbor. Like this wasn't a big ask. Like plugging into someone's private property and running it all night was just a community handshake. I hesitated, then smiled politely. I actually use it myself, usually between 1 and 6 a.m., since I work nights. Her smile twitched. "Oh, I see. Well, I figured maybe there was a way to—" "I'd really prefer to keep it private," I said, still friendly. "It's connected directly to my panel. Usage is metered, and I keep it locked outside of charging times." There was a beat, just long enough for her to decide she wasn't used to hearing no. "Well, of course," she said. "I just thought you'd want to help out. We're really about unity on this block." "Unity's great," I said, as long as it respects ownership. She gave a tight nod, mumbled a good night, and walked away. I assumed that was the end of it. Turns out, it was just the warm-up act. The next morning, around 5:03 a.m., I was jolted awake by motion alerts from the security cam app on my phone. I groaned, blinked, and pulled up the feed. There, in the fuzzy glare of the streetlight, was Karen's nephew. Hoodie up, phone flashlight on, fiddling with the charging box mounted to my garage. The cord was already halfway unraveled. I threw on jeans and a t-shirt and walked out the front door. Calm, but awake now, and very much not amused. "Can I help you?" I called out. He jumped. "Oh, sorry, I thought it was okay." "It's not. That's private property." He held up his hands, sheepish. "Karen said you said it was fine." "No," I said flatly. "I absolutely did not." And then, right on cue, Karen emerged from her porch across the street, robe on, phone in hand. "Oh my God," she shouted. "Why are you confronting him like that? He's just trying to charge." "You told him I gave permission," I said. She didn't answer, just stared. "Ma'am, you need to step back," I added. "This is not your property." "I'm calling 911, she snapped. And then she did, at 5:06 a.m., because I wouldn't let her guest use my charger. You don't really expect your day to start with a trespasser on your driveway, especially not at 5 o'clock in the morning. But then again, nothing about living next to Karen ever quite followed the rules of normal life. The night before had been quiet, or at least it started that way. I had just finished a long shift, came home around midnight, and like always, plugged in my car. I'd gotten used to the soft click of the charger locking into place, the faint hum of energy doing its job while the neighborhood slept. Everything about that routine gave me peace, predictability, control, that made what happened next feel even more surreal. Just after 5 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I blinked awake to the chime of my security app, pushing an alert, motion detected, driveway. That wasn't unusual in itself. Sometimes it was a cat. Sometimes the wind would nudge a branch into view. But as I pulled up the live feed with one squinted eye, I saw something very different. A man in a hoodie was on my driveway, standing over my EV charger. I watched, baffled, as he tried to unravel the cable. Not break in, not steal, just use it, without knocking, without asking, just casually hooking up like it was a free vending machine on public land. I slid out of bed and threw on yesterday's jeans. My charger was locked when not in use, but still, the audacity of it had me wide awake in seconds. I stepped outside calmly, but with full awareness of the situation. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, voice even. The man turned around, startled. He was probably in his 20s, tall, lanky, a little too casual for someone standing on someone else's private property. "Oh, sorry, man," he said. "My aunt said you were cool with me charging." I stopped mid-step. "Your aunt?" "Karen," he said, motioning across the street. "She told me you said we could use your charger at night." My jaw clenched. I absolutely did not say that. He hesitated. "She said, I spoke to her yesterday. I made it very clear the charger is private and locked for a reason." Just then, I heard the telltale squeak of Karen's storm door opening. She stepped out in a robe, phone already in hand, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "What's going on?" she called, voice sharp with manufacturer concern. "I caught your guest trying to plug into my charger without permission," I said. "He's not trespassing," she barked. "You agreed." "No, I didn't. I told you directly that I charge overnight and it's not for public use." Karen huffed. "This is harassment. He's just trying to charge his car. You're making a scene over nothing." "No," I said, holding firm. "You're escalating something that never should have gone beyond a polite no." That's when she lifted her phone and, with zero hesitation, said, "I'm calling 911. There's a certain absurdity that hits you when you realize your neighbor is about to call emergency services over a charger. Not a fight, not a fire, not even an actual crime. A charger. And not just any charger, mind." I folded my arms, not out of aggression, but disbelief. Karen turned slightly to the side, giving her best frantic concerned citizen voice as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, I need to report an aggressive neighbor. He's blocking access to our car. Yes, he's yelling at my nephew. No, I don't know if he has a weapon. Hey, I said, stepping forward slightly, calm but assertive. You might want to rethink what you're saying. I have security footage. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody made a threat. Your guest walked onto my property and tried to use a private appliance. She turned away, ignoring me, continuing the call. I sighed and walked back to my porch. This was about to get unnecessarily complicated. By 5:20 a.m., 2 patrol cars rolled up the street. Their headlights cut through the dawn light, flickering over Karen's manicured lawn and the scene she'd staged so confidently. I stood on my porch, arms at my sides, not moving. The first officer stepped out, hand resting casually on his belt. Karen charged toward him like a dog to a chew toy. "There," she exclaimed. "That's him. That's the one threatening us." The officer barely had time to process her statement before I raised my hand. "Morning, officer," I said. "Homeowner here. I've got footage if you'd like to see it." That slowed him down. He looked me over. Calm posture, no weapon, clear voice. He nodded. "Let's talk." Karen tried to interject, but he held up a hand. "Ma'am, please wait on the sidewalk." She stopped mid-word, flustered. I led the officer inside briefly, showed him the security footage from 10 minutes earlier. Karen's nephew stepping onto my property, tampering with the charger, then me coming out, unarmed, unaggressive, simply stating that it wasn't okay. When we came back out, the tone had changed. "Ma'am," the officer said, turning to Karen, "I've reviewed the footage. At no point did your nephew have permission to access the charger. The homeowner made that clear both yesterday and again this morning. This is private property. There was no crime committed by him confronting someone on his own driveway." Karen blinked. "So, what? You're not going to do anything? Not unless you'd like to explain why you falsely reported aggression and obstruction on a 911 call." Her face paled instantly. I didn't know." "We're going to log this as a misuse of emergency services," he said. "I'd recommend no further contact with your neighbor unless it's through official HOA channels, and only when appropriate." The silence that followed was glorious. Karen didn't say another word. She turned, grabbed her nephew's arm, and marched back across the street without so much as a glance. The officer turned back to me and sighed. "Wish every one of these calls came with a security feed." "Wish they didn't come at all," I said. He smiled faintly. "You handled it well. I'll log it clean." "Thanks, officer." And with that, the patrol cars rolled away, leaving behind nothing but tire tracks and a silence too thick to measure. You'd think it would have ended there, with Karen caught red-handed, reprimanded by real authority, and thoroughly embarrassed. But no, not Karen. Later that day, a message went out on the HOA community forum, a passive-aggressive novella under the heading, "Clarification on this morning's misunderstanding." She didn't name names, but she might as well have. Claimed she was concerned for guest safety, that a neighbor became unreasonably hostile, and that she was trying to mediate a peaceful solution to a spontaneous request. I didn't reply. Didn't need to, because by that point, the neighborhood already knew. Several neighbors reached out privately. One brought over coffee. Another left a sticky note on my mailbox that just said, "Karen strikes again. Glad you stood your ground." The truly surreal part of it all? This never had to happen. All she had to do was accept no. Instead, she made it a crusade. And the only thing she managed to charge was her reputation, straight into a wall. By the time the second officer stepped out of the squad car, Karen was already knee-deep in damage control. She'd shifted from panicked victim to concerned citizen, pacing the sidewalk like someone directing traffic at her own crisis scene. "This entire block's going to suffer if we can't come together," she declared to no one in particular. All I asked for was one small favor. One. The officers weren't impressed. You could see it on their faces, that mix of mild fatigue and quiet skepticism that only comes from being dispatched to yet another HOA-generated emergency. They scanned the scene, a sleepy cul-de-sac, a blinking EV charger, and one red-faced woman performing her guilt like it was Shakespeare in the park. One of them approached me directly. "You the homeowner?" "I am," I replied calmly. "You mind giving me your side?" I didn't mind at all. We stepped a few feet away from Karen, just enough for the second officer to remain with her while I explained. I kept it short, respectful, and professional. "On the charger," I said. Installed it last year. It's hardwired into my property, metered separately on my electric bill. I use it overnight due to my work schedule. The officer nodded. Yesterday, Karen came over and asked if her out-of-town guest could use it. I said no, politely but firmly. It's private. This morning at 5 a.m., her nephew came on my driveway and tried to plug in without permission. I paused. She told him I said it was fine. I didn't. He took notes. She claims I confronted him aggressively. I didn't. I've got security footage if you'd like to see it. Absolutely, the officer said. Let's take a look. I led him to my porch and pulled the feed up on my tablet. I'd already saved the motion-triggered clip from earlier that morning. We watched together, Karen's nephew stepping onto the property, attempting to unlock the cable housing. Then me stepping outside, calm, hands in pockets. My voice was low and measured, even when I told him to stop. You could even see Karen in the background stepping on her porch, phone already pressed to her ear. That's clear enough, the officer said after it ended. Appreciate you showing me. No problem, I said. When we returned to the driveway, Karen was mid-sentence. And then he got defensive, like he was ready to fight. I don't know what he's hiding, but it's not neighborly, I'll tell you that. The officer raised a hand. Mom, I've reviewed the footage. Your guest was on his property. The homeowner remained calm. No threats were made, and there was no aggression. He was well within his rights to ask someone to leave his driveway. Karen blinked. But it's a charger. It's just a charger. In a neighborhood like this, we should be helping each other. The officer was firm but neutral. That charger is private property. It's not part of any HOA common area, and it's not covered under community access agreements. Permission to use it is entirely at the discretion of the homeowner. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But the HOA has guidelines. Guidelines, the officer said, don't override property law. You can't call 911 because someone won't let you use their outlet. Her composure started cracking. You could see the embarrassment working its way through her spine like a slow electric current. Her posture stiffened. Her voice lost its bite. She glanced around, realizing a few neighbors had come to their windows. One man down the block was out in his robe, watering plants just a little too slowly. Am I being charged with something? She asked defensively. No, the officer replied. But this call is going in our log as a non-emergency misuse. Next time, I'd recommend try to resolve things through the HOA first. Or better yet, not try to force access to private equipment. Then came the finishing blow. If it were the other way around, if someone was on your property at 5 in the morning trying to use something without your consent, I think you'd expect the same protection. Karen had no comeback for that. She stepped back, muttered something about calling the board, and crossed the street without looking back. The officers stayed behind for a moment. One of them handed me a card. If she continues to escalate or sends threats through the HOA, let us know. I will, I said. And for what it's worth, nice setup you've got here. Clean install. That actually made me smile. Thanks. Did it myself. He nodded. Then both officers climbed back into their vehicles and rolled away, their red and blue lights fading into the morning haze. After they left, I stood on my porch for a moment, breathing in the silence. The absurdity of it all washed over me again. Who weaponizes 911 over a charging cable? Karen does. Later that afternoon, I took the extra step of printing out a photo of the charger and writing a short note. This charger is private property. It is not for public or community use. Access is restricted and monitored. Thank you for respecting boundaries. I laminated it, screwed it to the wall next to the plug, and locked the cable housing. Petty? Maybe. But after getting the cops called on me at dawn, I figured I'd earned the right to spell things out. I thought that might be the end of it. It wasn't. The next day, I received a formal-looking envelope in my mailbox, the HOA seal in the corner, the return address marked Karen Matheson, HOA president. Inside was a typed request for courtesy compliance, referencing a pattern of hostility regarding resource sharing and reminding me of the neighborhood's commitment to cooperative energy. I laughed out loud. It wasn't even subtle. It was her trying to reframe the whole thing, not as a violation of my space, but as me being stingy with a community utility. I didn't respond. but I did forward it to the police department along with a scanned copy of the 911 report number and a short note. For your records, in case she tries to escalate through policy channels. They replied within an hour. Noted. You're within your rights. Let us know if she contacts you again. What happened next didn't come from me. It came from the people watching. The neighbors. The ones who saw the patrol cars. The ones who got Karen's email blast afterward, trying to frame the situation as a community misunderstanding. They weren't buying it. One neighbor, Thomas, dropped by a few evenings later with a six-pack and a shrug. Just wanted to say, you handled that like a pro. Most people would have lost it. Another, Melinda, waved at me from her porch and called out, heard you gave the Chargers sermon last night. Word had spread, not through me, through observation, through common sense. And slowly, a shift began to happen. Karen wasn't viewed the same. People started ignoring her directives. Her emails got shorter. Her clipboard didn't appear as often. You could feel it, that quiet erosion of authority that happens not through confrontation, but through exposure. All because she tried to force access to something that was never hers to begin with. In the days that followed the 5 a.m. Charger incident, something subtle but undeniable began to shift across the neighborhood. Not overnight, not loudly, but in exactly the way that power always slips away from people like Karen. Not because it was ripped from her hands, but because enough people quietly stopped pretending she ever really held it. It started with the email. Karen, perhaps realizing that calling 911 on a neighbor over an electric vehicle charger might not be the community optics when she thought it would be, sent out a long, winding message titled, clarifying recent events and reaffirming HOA unity. I knew it was damage control the moment I opened it. She started by referencing a regrettable miscommunication regarding shared resources, claimed she had acted in the spirit of neighborly concern, and, best of all, described the 911 call as a precautionary outreach to ensure all parties remain safe. Precautionary outreach. For a guy in sweatpants asking someone not to steal electricity. The real kicker, though, came 2 paragraphs later. In times of growing energy demands and community growth, it is crucial we remain open to sharing, particularly when it comes to renewable infrastructure such as charging stations, water-conserving irrigation tech, and similar forward-facing resources. That wasn't an explanation. It was a pitch. She was trying to spin the whole fiasco into a case for shared access policies, as if I had somehow been the test case in a larger debate over eco-communalism. And that's when the replies began rolling in. Within 24 hours, the HOA forum lit up. First came the polite pushback. Angela, while I appreciate the goal of unity, I think it's important we respect private property. Asking is fine, but assuming access is another thing entirely. Then came the ones with teeth. Daryl S. Calling the police on someone at 5 in the morning is not how you ask for a favor. Kendra L. Karen, you're twisting this. I saw the whole thing. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. Your guest was out of line, not him. Paul N. My wife and I have been afraid to say this publicly, but we've received more than one strange notice from the HOA about things that weren't even violations. After what happened this week, we're starting to question how things are being run. That thread got nearly a dozen likes, which in HOA forum terms might as well be going viral. And then came the side conversations, the whispered acknowledgments while watering plants, the neighborly nods in driveways, the people who never spoke up before now dropping casual lines like, you handled that pretty gracefully. She's going to have a hard time spinning this one. Or, my personal favorite, from a quiet older woman named Mrs. Chapman who lived 3 doors down. If she ever tries to plug into my irrigation timer, I'm calling the Marines. Karen, to her credit, or perhaps to her stubbornness, didn't back off right away. She tried to double down. 3 days later, she sent out a proposal for discussion at the next HOA meeting focused on creating a standardized approach to renewable resource sharing. In it, she suggested establishing a voluntary neighborhood charging network where EV charger owners would opt into an access pool managed by the HOA. And while she never said it outright, the implication was clear. If enough people agreed, then refusing to join would start to feel suspicious. Manipulative? Yes. Predictable? Extremely. But this time, the board wasn't having it. The meeting that followed was the first one in a long time where chairs had to be pulled in from the community clubhouse's storage closet. Attendance was up. Eyes were sharp. Voices, even the polite ones, had a new edge. Angela, the vice president, opened the floor by acknowledging the incident and the proposal Karen had introduced. Then she asked a question. Before we discuss Karen's proposal, can we get a show of hands? Who here owns their own EV charger? For hands went up. She nodded. And how many of you would be comfortable with the HOA managing access to your charger? All 4 hands stayed down. The message was received, loud and clear. The room turned toward Karen, who tried to laugh it off. Well, I suppose we need more dialogue then. But the laughter didn't come, and neither did the support. At that same meeting, a new item was introduced for board consideration, a formal policy outlining non-interference with private property. Modeled after existing local ordinances, it spelled out, in plain language, what should have always been obvious. If it's installed on your property and maintained by you, it is not HOA jurisdiction. HOA leaders cannot suggest, coerce, or shame residents into shared use. Calls to emergency services must be based on actual emergencies, not enforcement disagreements. It passed unanimously. Karen abstained. Afterward, as people filed out of the room and into the twilight of the parking lot, I got a few nods. A handshake, even a quiet thank you from someone I'd never seen outside his house before. The best part? I hadn't spoken once during the meeting. I didn't have to. Truth had done its work. Over the next week, Karen's presence in the community visibly diminished. No more email blasts. No surprise visits. Her walks became shorter. Her eyes stayed low. At one point, she crossed the street when she saw me working on my front flower bed. I didn't say anything. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. Just done. The same way you get done with a long day or an expired milk carton. Quiet, total, irreversible. Neighbors started taking small liberties again. Colorful porch chairs, bird feeders, even a flag or two that didn't match the HOA's patriotic palette. Karen said nothing. She was still technically president, but at this point, it was like watching a ship sail with no wind and half a sail. And me? I added a small laminated tag to my charger. Just a little message under the locking mechanism that read, "Private use only, not HOA property. Respect charges respectfully." A few days later, I noticed someone had stuck a post-it underneath it. On it, written in careful ballpoint script, "Amen. Lot 14-inch. The funniest part of it all? Karen thought she was enforcing order. Instead, she ignited a conversation about privacy, about misuse of authority, and about what happens when you mistake leadership for ownership. She tried to plug in a power that wasn't hers. In the neighborhood, they pulled the cord. It didn't come with fanfare. No big announcement. No dramatic resignation speech. No sudden power struggle in the HOA. Just a quiet update in the next HOA meeting minutes, listed between budget adjustments and a reminder about spring mulch pickup. Karen Matheson has voluntarily stepped back from her role as president and will remain on the board in an advisory capacity. That was it. One sentence. One carefully worded line that signaled what the whole neighborhood already knew. Her authority was gone. She didn't attend that meeting. In fact, she hadn't been seen at any of the smaller committee gatherings for weeks. No more morning walks with her clipboard. No more measuring people's front hedges with a scowl. Karen hadn't moved out, but she might as well have. The real power had shifted without a single raised voice. After the 5 a.m. charger debacle, I had no interest in revenge. No need to escalate anything further. I had done what mattered, drawn a boundary, stuck to it, and let the truth settle into people's minds on its own. That was enough. Still, I made a few practical changes. First, I added a tamper-resistant lock to the charger housing. It wasn't out of paranoia, just peace of mind. And maybe, if I'm being honest, a small reminder that not everything is up for communal vote. Right next to it, I added a weatherproof sign with simple wording. Private EV charger. Not shared. Not HOA governed. Please respect boundaries. It wasn't hostile, just firm. And to my surprise, a few days after I put it up, I noticed a neighbor walking past with his dog paws and give me a thumbs up. We hadn't spoken more than once before that. Now, It was like the sign had done the talking for me. Soon after, the board held a special vote on what they called personal amenity access guidelines. The motion passed with no objections. The new rule read, personal property installed on privately deeded land, including but not limited to electric vehicle chargers, irrigation systems, satellite dishes, and garden tools, is not subject to HOA usage expectations, group sharing policies, or enforcement by board members unless it violates explicit zoning or legal restrictions. Translation: what's yours is yours. For the first time in a long while, people exhaled. Around the neighborhood, little things began to change. Neighbors who used to keep their heads down started speaking up, not loudly, but with more confidence. A woman named Denise, who'd once gotten a warning for her non-compliant mailbox paint, repainted it bright blue and added a hand-painted welcome sign. When no warning came, she grinned like she'd won a small battle. Someone else mounted a weather vane. Another planted a pollinator garden too close to the sidewalk. No one reported it. No one complained. The HOA still existed, but it started to feel like it served the neighborhood, not ruled it. As for me, things went back to normal, but better. I kept working nights. I kept charging the car at off hours. I kept mostly to myself. But when people waved, they meant it now. A few neighbors brought up the incident during evening chats, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with disbelief. You really kept your cool, one said. Wish I could have been that calm, another added. All I ever told them was the truth. Sometimes the quietest no is louder than the biggest scene. And in this case, it rewired the whole street that if someone thinks calling the cops will force you to hand over what's yours, remind them, just because it's electric doesn't mean it's free. And if they keep pushing, let the law do the charging. Because that's the thing about boundaries. They don't have to be shouted, argued, or broadcast. Sometimes, all it takes is standing still, calmly, while someone else overplays their hand and prove your point for you. Karen didn't just call 911 over a charger. She called them because control slipped through her fingers and she thought authority could be borrowed the way her guest tried to borrow my electricity. But real authority isn't loud. It's quiet. It's confident. And more importantly, it's legal. So whether it's your driveway, your outlet, or just your peace of mind, don't flinch when someone tries to turn your property into their playground. Hold your ground. Document everything. Smile if you feel like it. Because sometimes the best way to deal with overreach isn't a shouting match. It's a silent, locked charger and a city statute backing you up. And the next time someone thinks they can plug into what's yours, they'll think twice before crossing that line.